Hello and welcome back to Spy Hard's podcast. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur, looking for his car in this robot car facility and really lost.
I mean, there's plenty of other cars you could take, Cam.
I mean, they keep appearing on these conveyor belts, and so I might as well.
And the odd Tom Cruise just falls down from the ceiling from time to time.
Yes, but does no actual injury to himself, which we may talk about in a few moments.
Yes, we might just come back to that. And as you alluded to there, Cam, we're continuing our journey into 2011's Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. And I think we have one heck of a guest to start off the celebrations.
Yes, we are talking to Gregg Smrz, who was the stunt coordinator on Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, and he's behind the Burj Khalifa. He's dealing with that big car action sequence at the end of the film. So he is going to be the mastermind behind all the action of Mission Impossible, and we're going to pick his brain about all the cool moments. But also, he is a very highly regarded second unit director and stuntman who has a ton of other credits we're going to dig into. Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, perhaps? Mission Impossible 2? Who knows what else? There's so many to choose from.
Yeah, this man has barely done an interview as well, which is absolutely fascinating, and I can't wait to share with you all his insights. And there's a lot of stories about Tom Cruise and working on the Mission films, and plenty of other films too, which we get into. So I think, without further ado, let's clip ourselves to the cable and descend into the interview. And joining us on the show now, stunt coordinator, second unit director extraordinaire with films like Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, Night and Day, Six Underground, Captain America Civil War, Red Notice. I could keep on going. It is the one and only Gregg Smrz. Hello, sir. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Living the dream. All the better to talk to you. We have a ton of questions about a ton of spy movies you've worked on. You've got quite the resume. You've delved deep into the world of spy movies, which is what we like to do as well. But I think before we get to Mission Impossible, and we got a lot of questions about the Burj Khalifa and stuff like that, let's take it back a step. I want to know what inspired you to want to get into this crazy film industry in the first place. What did you want to get into doing stunts, and how did that journey begin for you?
Pun intended. I fell into it, and I wanted to race motorcycles. And I was into Formula One. I got into road racing motorcycles, and my brothers, I had twin brothers, and they were working to become stunt performers. My mom was in the business, not as a stunt person. She was a career extra. This is back when you could make a living as an extra in America. And she did commercials, hand modeling, voiceovers, all that kind of stuff. And I've been in and out of the business since I was 6 months old. And I kind of hated it, to be honest with you, at first, because I was forced into it as a kid and just working long hot hours. And, you want to go out and play. You don't want to be on the set. And I got into bikes, and I would always help my brothers prep their stunts. They would rehearse. And so eventually I started working part-time as a stunt performer. And then as I was racing Formula One motorcycles, and they canceled the series in America. And when they canceled that, I pulled the plug and made the full-time switch.
Was there ever like a feeling of, okay, I'm working part-time in the stunt industry, but I want to move on to something else? Like, did you just kind of decide once the racing career wasn't going to pan out that stunts was where it was at, or did you consider other things as well?
You know what? I wanted to fly helicopters, and I do have my license, and I got injured when I was younger. I tried to join the military, and this is how I got into motorcycles, into racing. Is I tried to join the military, and they did not want me because of an injury that I had had. So I got out, and I go, well, now what am I going to do? So I went to motorcycle school down in Florida, heard the bikes racing around the speedway, because we were only a quarter mile from the speedway. And I went and watched the Daytona 200, and that was it. I knew that's what I'm going to do. And 3 years later, I was racing there.
It's kind of crazy just hearing about sort of the family connection you had there with stunts, because it seems like an industry that has a lot of families. Like we've had Gary Powell, I think, on the show before, but he's got his brother Greg, their father Nosha Powell in the British stunts industry for a very very long time. I think one of their offspring now also is in the stunts game, and it's just crazy. There's like a bit of a family thing going on there.
Well, now my son's in it, and he was.
There you go.
I was hoping he wouldn't get in it because it is a brutal business. It's
Sure.
a brutal business physically, and it's a dying business, to be honest with you. And
Wow.
I just, I don't know how many years there's left, but with the computers and the AI and all this stuff, we're getting phased out. Right now in America's not working a whole lot. Most of the work is in Europe because it's a lot cheaper to film over there. That's why I'm always over there. And I used to be able to get to bring 15 people, and now if I have to fight to bring 5. And they got me down to 3 on my last job, and it was a horrible failure until I brought in the other 2 people. And even they saw the turns. You have to have your people to deliver. If you hire me for a job, you have to hire the team, or it's not the same thing. But you're only as good as your people.
And I was like, oh, I like to feel optimistic that like the popularity of things like John Wick that really grab audiences are going to like lead to more of a resurgence of that type of filmmaking, but you're not really feeling that so much.
Yeah, no, I mean, we just did a remake of The Killer, John Woo's The Killer, over in Paris, and it just released 2-3 days ago. But I like those kind of movies. I don't watch a lot of movies anymore. I want to watch something that's got a story, and it can have a lot less action if it's got a really good story to it.
Sure.
That's going to hold my interest. But if it's just mindless action, then I'm not really interested in paying any attention.
No, understandable. There's certainly quite a few of those films happening from time to time now, especially a lot of computer-generated stuff gets thrown in there too. You see a lot of the time. Going back to sort of getting your foot in the door now with stunts, and you're making that transition and as a job. What was your sort of first big break that sort of put your name on the map?
It's funny is I had just quit racing motorcycles, and I moved to California, and I wasn't there 3 months, and there was a job interview for to double a lead actor on the movie Quiet Cool, and it was about it's only out on VHS. It's that old, and it was a story about a ex motorcycle road racer turned undercover cop and detective, and it was him on a motorcycle chasing the bad guys. And I interviewed for it, and the director he was from Canada and loved road racing and saw my resume, and then they stood me next to the actor, and I was his twin brother. So that was it just was luck, and I did that job, and that was my start. So that was it's hard to get. I'd worked part-time for many years in New York, but it used to be really hard to get in this business, and now you can go grab the local bistro guy, the coffee guy, and have him in the business tomorrow. And then the next thing you know, he's running the town. It's the weirdest business right now. And it's changed quite a bit.
Is that James Remar you were doubling on that one?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, just having a little look now. There you go.
It was, and it was the Smrz it was me and my 2 brothers were on it, and it was just the Smrz brothers thrill show. It was we had a lot of fun on it.
Well, I was actually going to ask you, because you have a passion for bike racing. You're working, on your like this movie, doing a lot of that. But leading up to that, when you would watch movies, were there any movies that got racing right? The ones that you would look at and go like, that's kind of what I aspire to?
No, nobody has ever gotten it right, and I'm going to change that. That's my mission now. Is
Okay.
I have a script that is a really good script about road racing, and it's really to the point, and I want to direct it, and there's not going to be any of the crap that you see. It's going to be real, the real deal, and the real stuff that goes on. And I hope to get it off the ground. I'm going to get it off the ground. I don't hope to get it off the ground. I'm going to.
That's the attitude. That's what we like to hear. And actually, it's one of my questions later on is what you're working on at the moment. So maybe that's a little tease for when I ask that question later on. But you're speaking of motorcycles, and you mentioned John Woo, and I want to slightly bring us into Mission Impossible now, because much as I could go to Ghost Protocol, that wasn't your first brush with Mission Impossible. That's Mission Impossible 2. So how did that connection come about? And is that through John Woo?
Mission Impossible 2. My brother was working. He got a job on the film as the stunt coordinator, and he brought me along. It had the motorcycle sequence on it, and with my motorcycle knowledge, I came along as the assistant stunt coordinator and key rigger and motorcycle wrangler, and just kind of covering all those bases while it's like we say, you're in the office with the mucky mucks dealing with all the producers and the director and all the headaches. And then you have that's my, like when I say I need my team of 5 guys, you're stuck in the office. You need your guys that you trust 100% out there getting it done. So that's kind of how I got into the John Woo world. And I just hit it. I mean, John and I get along really, really well. And, you have to, people don't realize how smart he is. He's a really smart man, and he speaks, he understands English 100%. And people don't think he does because he's very quiet. And you ask him a question, and I mean, I'll sit there and I'll ask him a question, and I'll just sit there for 3 minutes. I'm waiting. And then he'll spit the answer out. It could be 2 words. It could be 1 word, no. But you have to wait for it. And so I was very fortunate that we went on from that to how we did Face Off and Paycheck, and I did a BMW commercial with him, and then he left the country after Paycheck. He left the country for a long time.
Yeah. And I was going to ask, from someone who actually helps bring action to life, when you're working with John Woo, so many people talk about the specifics of John Woo action, but I feel like they don't quite understand exactly what it is he brings to it. Like, from someone who collaborates with him on these sequences, what is it that John Woo, like the way he approaches action, that is different than someone else?
With John, it's difficult to work with him with action because every punch, every move, every bullet has to have a purpose and a reason to steer the story. And there's never really, I mean, there is at some points action just to have some action, but not in his mind. It's gotta have a story of, like, I'll say, hey, we're having a problem with this, and can the guy do this instead? And you'll sit there and just sit there for people run off. He's not answering me. He is. He's thinking, he's editing in his head. And then he'll tell you 3 to 5 minutes later, he'll say, yeah, you can do that, but now they have to turn left at the light. They can't go straight. They have to turn left. And it's like, I don't need to know why. I just know I'll understand it later. And so that's the most difficult thing I want to say is just that, making it all make sense. And a lot of people don't care about that, but he does.
And sort of alongside John Woo, you have your sort of first brush, I guess, with that film with Tom Cruise as well, which you're doing the motorcycle sequence. How was he like to work with on Mission Impossible 2? And obviously that relationship will go on to do many things later on, but that first meeting you had with him there, what was that like?
I mean, Tom he treats some people extremely well. I mean, I consider him, we told him, if you ever want to quit acting, he could be a stuntman. He really could. People, I get into arguments with people. They don't believe he does his own stuff, but he does 90, I'm going to say 95+% of it. And his stunt doubles don't get to do anything but rehearse. And yeah, he was on that job. He was very gung ho. I remember we had him jump off of a condor, and we were testing a decelerator, and we said, okay, yeah, just go ahead. And most people would just fall off. Not him. He jumped like as far as he could and shocked the crap out of us. And we were like, oh my God. But later in the movie, I mean, he jumped 85 feet, I think it was, off of upper level straight down into camera. And we stopped him. His face stopped a foot above the camera, 1 foot. And he did that at least 15 times. And he just wanted to go again and again and again. And that's Tom. The motorcycle stuff, the knife in the eye, that was real.
Yeah.
That was real. And I was my first day covering the set where my brother was off doing second unit and I'm on the set, and Tom's got a real knife. I want a real knife. So the effects guys made a rig, and it was on a cable, but I'm looking at him and I go, if you sneeze, you're going to lose your eye. Don't, and he's like, I won't sneeze. But
I mean, we had Arthur Anderson, the producer on that film, on the show, or assistant director, I think, on that film, many moons ago now. But like, since that interview went out, people have said no, they were lying about it being a real knife. I'm like, why would Arthur lie about that? And and there's like behind the scenes footage of it, but people still don't believe that actually he wanted to have that, and he did.
We were petrified, even though it was on a cable, and we knew it's still, because I'm telling you, it was 2 millimeters from his eye, the tip of a real knife. And we were just like, if an earthquake happened, you gotta have, it's just, and we have to think about all that crap. So we can't just leave it to risk. But yeah, no, I've had many conversations with him about, Tom, and he goes, but I'm having fun. Is it dangerous? And I'm like, not if you don't screw up.
Then it's great.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, would they ever allow you to shoot a knife sequence like that nowadays?
Tom can do whatever the hell he wants.
That's the key.
Yeah. No, most other people, no, they'd think you were insane. But Tom he'll convince you to, if your wife or girlfriend gave you a brand new pair of shoes and he wanted those shoes, he'll get them. He'll convince her that he should have. He's so convincing. When we went to do the Burj Khalifa, they said they're never going to let this happen. I go, Tom will make it happen, and he did. He can make anything happen.
Well, I think you're leading us beautifully into Ghost Protocol. There is a chapter of night and day in between these two films that I think we'll come back to as a spy movie itself. But let's keep on the mission train. Obviously, there's a Mission Impossible 3 happens in between. Mission Impossible 4, Ghost Protocol comes along. How did you get brought back into the fold for Mission Impossible 4?
Now I'm going to throw a U-turn on you, Night and Day.
There it is.
It was Night and Day. Okay.
We got hired to do Night and Day, and my brother and I as a team. So I went on first unit, he did second unit, and we never saw each other for the whole half a year that we were on the show. And so I was working with Tom every day for the whole show. And at the end of the show, it was actually, it was a pretty funny joke he did on me. So I busted my ass on that show. And on the last day, 4 days before the end of the show, the last sequence, he dreams up this insane stunt, and he wants it, and we're shooting it in 4 days. And it was where he jumps and dives to the mast of the boat and swings down and lands on the dock. And that's all in one. And he wanted it all in one. And we worked night and day to make it happen. And we pulled it off, and we brought him down and he rehearsed it. His first rehearsal, he nailed it. And so he comes back and we shoot it. Show's wrapped. It's over. And he comes through and he shakes everybody's hand on my crew. Thank you so much for all your hard work. He walks right past me, doesn't even look at me, shakes everybody's hand and says, thank you very much for all your hard work. And he turns around and he walks off. And he's gone. I look at my buddies and I go, well, there you have it. I guess he's pissed at me about something, and I go, I don't even get an adios, nothing. And so we're down there and it was hot and we're putting all the pads away. And all of a sudden the radio goes off and it says security guard, Greg. And I go, yeah. And he goes, Tom Cruise wants to see you at his car immediately. And I'm like, oh, here we go. Now I'm gonna get torn to shreds. So I come walking up and security guards have their arms crossed and he's sitting in the door of the car and everybody looks really mad. I walk up and he goes, nobody says a word. He just looks at me and he says, I get it. And I go, you get what? And he goes, it. And I go, what's it? And he goes, you're the magic. And I go, I don't understand. He goes, you're the magician behind the curtain. And I go, yeah. He goes, what are you doing? He goes, what do you got going on? He goes, you wanna go do MI4? And I go, well, yeah. And he goes, 6 a.m. tomorrow morning at Paramount. And I was there. And when we started working the whole crew, we were there the next day. And yeah, that's how I got on MI4.
Wow. Because I was curious if you'd actually just the relationship with Tom Cruise had kind of built over time because you'd also done Minority Report together.
My brother Brian did Minority Report. I only worked, I think I worked one day on, I covered a sequence down, I worked one day on the rigging thing, where he blasts up through the hull, the buildings. And in fact, when he goes through the floor and knocks all the people they fall over at the table. That's my son, my daughter, my wife. They're all in there. But I did a scene at the car facility where they have the big shootout, and so I did that where he escapes in the car. But yeah, my brother did Minority Report with them. We got called onto God, I forget the name of it. There's another movie after MI2 that he did where they were having trouble with space cam. They weren't getting the shots they wanted, so they brought us in to rig the camera for that sequence where we were descending a camera at like 80 miles an hour down a building and stopping it 10 feet above the ground. So we came in and did that. And yeah, I think that was it. I think that was the last one. Then they went to MI3.
Okay.
And we didn't go on that. That's the only one we missed. And then, yeah, 4. I did 4, and 4 led to 5. I would have done. I was supposed to do Oblivion, and I was supposed to do Jack Reacher, and I had a bunch that I backed out of because of the producers were just being jerks, and I don't want to work with jerks. I want to have fun.
Makes sense.
Best attitude to have, I'd say.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think then we should take a second just to acknowledge Night and Day and I think you are the magic, because that film features a lot of, specifically a great motorcycle sequence that sticks in my memory. But that a lot of great sequences in that altogether. So like just working with Tom in that one, were you coming up with a lot of the sequences yourself? Was that in the script? Where did the stunts from Night and Day really come from? Is that a lot from your head?
It was a combination of my brother and I in the beginning, and the script. The script was originally, it changed quite a bit during prep. Yeah. So we ended up redesigning the action and coming up with a plan. And then on mission 2, we made a motorcycle rig, a hydraulic motorcycle rig. Because even doesn't matter that Tom can ride, you can't film it. You know what I mean? You can't film somebody riding and get dialogue and all that. It just won't work. And
sure.
You're not going to get the camera moves you want. So you have to tow them. We even towed the stunt people. You have to tow the stunt people and to get those shots that you want. So the rig on mission 2 it worked. But it was phase 1, I'll call it. And then we took the knowledge from that and brought it to Night and Day, and they already had a rig that the effects guy had a rig, and we kind of modified it a little and kind of molded that into phase 2 of the hydraulic rig, and it worked pretty well. And that one rolled into MI4 was a total redesign. Yeah, no, all the action on Night and Day was a lot of it was James Mangold's, and Tom and James had 2 different ideas of what the movie was going to be. So a lot of those ideas came from Tom. Tom would tell me, this is what we're doing in 2 days. And I'd tell the director, and he'd go, we're not doing that. And the producers would go, that's not happening. And I'd go tell Tom, and I walked off the set at one point because they told me to stop working on that. It's not in the movie. So I called all my guys on the radio and I said, guys, you can stop putting that together. The producers told me it's not happening. And Tom's assistant gets on the radio and he monitored our channel and he goes, Gregg, Tom's sitting right here. And he said, disregard that order, continue to do it. And I go, copy that. And I go, disregard the order and continue on. And the producers go, Gregg, we told you that's not happening. And I go, understood. And I go, disregard that order.
Oh boy.
It's not working. And Tom Cruise, they come back and they go, Tom said, keep going. And I said, okay. I go, here's the deal. Everybody go to the craft service. Tom, you guys go get with the producers and figure this shit out. We left and we came back and it's in the movie. It's always in the movie. It's always his way.
Wow.
I over the years, I'm beginning to get that impression from Tom in the best ways, because I think he has a lot of like good ideas that he wants to see through, and he is the man with the power to do it.
He has the persuasion factor, and he has a lot of good ideas. And we learned over the years, like he would come in and say, okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this. And I go, copy that. And my guys would go, that doesn't make any sense. I go, it doesn't matter. I go, in his head, much like John Woo, in his head, Tom has a vision for where it's going. And we don't need to know why, we just need to execute it. And you'll learn as the show goes on where it's leading to. Only once did I call him out on an idea. And I said, you're always right, but this time you're wrong. And I go, trust me, you're wrong on this one. And he did.
I can't let that go. I need to know what that suggestion was now. That you've teased that. What was it? What was the idea?
It was on the Burj Khalifa. It was
Right.
part of the sequence. And he climbs up the glass,
Mhm.
and his glove fails. You got that hole. So he spent all that time climbing the building. And when he fell,
Mhm.
they wanted him to fall 200 feet. And the sandstorm blew him. This was in the script. The sandstorm that was coming in blew him back into the building, and his glove saved him. And I said, for one, you used all your brains and skill to get up there. And I had the stunt doubles. There's 150 people in the room. And they said, does anybody have anything? He goes, don't do it. Don't do it. He's whispering in my ear. And I said, I have to. And I raised my hand. And he goes, oh, you fool. And it's dead silent in there. So I said, so you fell 200 feet. The wind, the only reason you're alive is because pure chance of the wind blowing you in. So that takes out all skill out of it. I go, your arm would stick to the glass. And if it did stick, the only thing left would be your glove and your armpit, because your whole body would have ripped out. You'd be dead. And I go, can you fall 20 feet? And he goes, And the director goes, how about 40? And I go, okay. Yeah, I'll buy that. And Tom, and it was ultimately up to Tom though. And he thought about it. And I said, and even if you did fall 200 feet and land, are we going to watch you climb 200 feet again? Or are you just going to cut to you climbing in the building? So I was glad that they listened on that. Because I think it would have made, every show has a bad shot. Mm-hmm. And something you wish wasn't in there, and I think that would have been the one.
Right, and it's pretty much a perfect sequence. So Yeah, I mean the fact that the best ideas found their way onto the screen, I think, works to its favor. And I was going to ask, because it's such an ambitious sequence, what the origins were. Like, did it go through various permutations? Was it always pretty specific as to what you want to do on the Burj Khalifa?
They had the idea, the script was there, so they knew what they wanted us to do, but making it happen was a whole nother, we spent 200 hours rehearsing
Mm-hmm.
the climb. And I mean, we started out with, we hired world-class best climbers in the world to come in and help us. And we started out with, obviously the first thing you do is do a tilt wall, like the old Batman things. And you know what? It would have worked. You could have made that work. But we had an adjustable wall, and the more we tilted it up, the more real it became. And then we had problems with the hands sliding on the glass. So we we had gloves made out of with fiberglass and hooks on them we were gluing hooks on the glass. So you would reach up and put your glove and lock it into that hook. So now that wasn't, but you were looking too much to your hands and it just didn't look natural. And eventually we figured out how to make it work about 90% good. And it just wasn't working. So we perfectly the way we wanted it. And then they bought 3 floors of the real Burj Khalifa and flew it from Dubai into Prague, and we assembled it on stage. And we went out to Dubai and measured the glass temperature, the sun temperature. We knew where the sun was going to be coming from on the day that we filmed it. And we used we heated the set to 115 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And we had 10K lights shining on the glass. So you had the real glass temperature. And we would rehearse. Tom loves the heat. We were dying. We were melting. And even the night before we were leaving to go shoot the sequence, we still weren't happy. And the prop guy, people were starting to bicker. I'm like, calm, guys, it's nobody's fault. It's like he didn't do anything wrong. It's just not working. And then the prop guy walked in with a big shit-eating grin on his face, and he goes, I figured it out. And we go, what? And he goes, put these gloves on. So we put them on the wires, and we had them going, and the gloves were still slipping. And he goes, okay, hold your hands out. And he sprayed Windex on the gloves, and the chemical reaction made the gloves melt just for 5 minutes. So now when you stuck them, it was like a frog climbing the thing, and there was no more slipping. So now we put the things on the bottom of the shoes, and so that the shoes wouldn't slip, and we went off and it worked. But it came all the way down to the night before, and after all those hours and money spent, but I think it paid off.
That's unreal, because like when I look at that sequence, I think of all the technicalities of being that high. I don't think of the gloves slipping being a problem.
To us, and I mean, with the rigging, that's like they didn't want to film. We were only supposed to film for 3 days one day on the building, one day.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of it was going to be on a set piece, another 3-story set piece that we built out in the desert. And once we filmed day 1, Tom had an emergency meeting and we canceled the desert and filmed. He wanted to film the whole thing. We shot 1 day on the set, and we couldn't have done the shot that we wanted to out in the real build. It would have been just too much work. Not that we couldn't have done it, but it would have taken us another week to do what we could do in 1 day over on the other thing.
I mean, you're clearly up against it with that sort of 0 hour coming through with the Windex in the last moment. Was there ever a plan B as to what to do once you got there?
No, it would have worked. We were close enough that it would have worked, but maybe you could have changed it in the story and made it a part of the story that they didn't work perfectly. You know what I mean? That they would slide just a little bit before they grabbed. And if you really concentrated, you could do it, but we didn't want him to have to do it. We wanted him to act, you know what I mean? And just have the rig work perfect for him so he could do his job and not be concentrating on doing a stunt guy's job of making it look right. And in the end, it just yeah, I don't know. I'm a believer then that shit always works out. If you give it your best, it always works out. So, and if it doesn't, it wasn't meant to be. But
I mean, we spoke about you sort of going from Night and Day to this very quickly, and we sort of jumped to the Burj, and I that's kind of what I want to talk a little bit more about. But was it always like when you got the script for Mission Impossible 4, was it always, and Tom Cruise is going to climb this building specifically, or was it just like Tom Cruise is going to do a big climb, and it went from there? Because it felt like from Ghost Protocol onwards, the Mission Impossibles did a bit more with these stunts. They went a bit larger with it, and you'd see like the jump on the motorcycle in the most recent one, going back through that. Was that the drive when you turned up on the set on Paramount day one of Mission Impossible 4? Was it we need to go big and we're going to climb the Burj, or was it we're going to go big and then we'll figure it out?
no, I don't even think the Burj was in the equation at that time. It came up maybe the first week of filming. Somebody, it was Brad Bird he had a lot of ideas, and I mean, it's when we were on the Burj, and the one day that we were on the set, he swings out, and we were really swinging out on the real building, and they're like, "Can he go further?" And I go, "Well, sure, he can go way further." And he goes, "Well, let's go further." I go, "We got a problem." And he goes, "What's that?" And I go, "He's got to come back. And the farther out we send him, the harder he's going to hit that glass at 1,700 feet. He's hitting it hard already." And I go, "I don't think we should go any further." And they go, "Well, can't you slow him down?" I go, "Not unless I put a cable to a helicopter." And I go, "There's nothing to pick to." I go, "So we can't stop him from hitting the building." And so I said, "Right now, I think he's hitting it about as hard as we can." So we stuck with that. And I think it was far enough. Then we went to the set piece, and where he lets go and impacts the glass, and Jeremy Renner catches him. But the catching was all done at the real Burj. When Jeremy Renner and them catch him, that was all the real Burj and them hanging out the window. And but the impact on the glass was on the set piece. And Brad goes, "I need him to go further." And I go, "Do you like Tom?" And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I love Tom." And I go, "Do you want Tom to be at work tomorrow?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I go, "Then we've gone as far as we can go." I mean, he was this far from hitting his face on the glass and hitting it with his hands. And I go, "If I go," he goes, "But I see that he's not hitting." And I go, "But you're going to go inside on stage for the actual impact shot." And I go, "So where the set, we didn't have the set piece. We only had the exterior glass."
Sure.
So when we went to the stage, we reversed it and had the interior set piece, and it was just and we swung them in for real on that. The impact was extremely hard. And but yeah, no, there was a lot of funny moments and a lot of with Brad. Brad had, he was trying to bring the animation world to reality. And I had to keep explaining to him, I go, they had a previs, and I go, "This is really cool, but there's not a camera in the world that can do this. Cameras don't fly, and people don't fly." And and he would just look at me and smile. And yeah, Brad was he was a lot of fun to work with. A lot of good ideas.
What was the tensest moment of shooting that sequence? Because to me, I look at it as someone who's terrified of heights, and I would be in hives the entire time. But was there a moment for you that just felt like, okay, this is kind of the moment I'm the most concerned about?
No, because I mean, my guys were, when he did the fall, when he's sitting there cutting the glass and he did the fall, and we were setting it all up, and I'm downstairs and the rig was one floor up, and I call them and I go, "Hey, can you guys extend the end mark 6 inches?" Well, the gear that we have, that's a 30-second job. and they're working on it, and 5 minutes goes by, and I'm like, how's it coming? They go, yeah, we're almost done. And everybody's like, Greg, what's going on? And I after like 10 minutes, I go, guys, are you done? And they go, we just need another minute. And I go, I'll be back. And I run up there and I go, what the hell are you doing? And they showed me, and they had a backup to the backup to the backup to the backup. And I go, so the weak link is the cable attached to the vest, right? That's, if anything's going to break, that's what's going to break, or the cable itself. And they go, yeah, you're right. And I go, so let's go. Let's just go. We're going. But it was if something broke, there was no surviving, obviously. And even when we left the building, the producer goes, oh, thank God we're out of here, because now we're going to the set piece. And I go, well, you can die just as easily from 60 feet as you can from 1700. I go, that's not even the slightest bit safer. And but the day he did that fall, I mean, my guys were worried. His wife and daughter were there watching, and they were, Tom was making a big, having a flight. Yeah, Dad's going to go for a little flight, and it's just, I'd look over, I'm like, oh God, but because we are playing with fire all the time. And so that was probably the most unnerving day, but not really for me. I mean, I really believe in our gear, and I believe in my guys, and we test so thoroughly that I don't never lose sleep. In fact, it's an MI4 thing he did where I've always told Tom I wake up at 3:30 in the morning, exactly, every night before a big stunt. And I lie there in bed, and I'm my left side, or whatever side of the brain's working. And I think about what we're doing. And if everything's good, I fall asleep in 2 minutes. And if I can't fall asleep, there's a problem. And only once did I wake up and we changed the stunt, not on a Tom Cruise movie, another one, but we actually changed the stunt and did it a different way, because I just had a bad feeling. And so Tom would always ask me, he'd come in and go, did you wake up at 3:30? And I go, yeah. And he goes, and I go, slept like a baby. And that was the confidence to him that it's a go, we're going. And I never had to cancel anything with Tom. But we also, on his movies, you have the time to rehearse. You have the money and you have the time to rehearse.
Well, I mean, that must be quite comforting to him as well. I mean, much as Tom Cruise comes across as this larger than life person, he still has fears like the rest of us. I imagine being out on that on the Burj, on those cables, despite trusting everyone, was still nerve-wracking for him.
Oh no, they asked me to describe Tom in an interview right after MI4. They said, you have 2 words to describe Tom. And I go, just 2? And they go, yeah. And I go, intense and fearless. And those are the 2 words. You can put that on his resume. He is very intense and he is fearless. He's not afraid of anything.
And it's interesting because I remember at the time they were looking at this 4th Mission Impossible as being the one to kind of end his time with the franchise in some capacity and potentially have Jeremy Renner take over. And I just can't imagine.
None of that.
Well, I can't imagine a different actor, though, being able to achieve what Tom Cruise does in a franchise like that.
Yeah, that was the rumor. And there was a scene where Tom was supposed to break his leg, and we rehearsed it. We had a whole rig, and where his leg was going to snap in half at the knee joint. And that was the end of Tom Cruise out in the field. And they wanted him to continue as the office guy, taking over, running it.
Yeah.
And the scene where he went out, I'm standing there with him, and I'm putting him, he's strapping his harness on, and I'm hooking him into the cable. And he looks at me and he's pissed. He's not happy. And we hook him all up, and he looks And I said, so are we breaking your leg? And he goes, no. He goes, I'm not going anywhere. And he went out on the set and did it his way. And he refused to do it their way. And he did it his way. He did that a few times on the show. If he wanted something to be done a certain way, he said dialogue during a fight scene. So he made it impossible to edit around his dialogue without doing it his way. He's a very, very smart man.
What was the scene where he was supposed to break his leg?
In the car park.
In the car park. Okay, so I guess yeah, just basically stopping the torpedo and breaking the leg in the process.
Yeah, they were going to break his leg before, and instead he turned it into jumping off jumping off the thing down into the car that was coming up. That was intense. And yeah, no, that was a difficult movie. That was a very difficult movie to do.
I was going to ask about the car sequence because like that is a very ambitious, elaborate sequence, and I'm curious. Like, I would imagine there's a fair amount of CG involved in that one. Am I correct?
No.
No, not in the car sequence. Okay, interesting.
They built a real car park. That's a real functioning car park. And then
Wow.
our trick was you have a car descending.
Yeah.
And he jumps like 40 feet into a car that's descending. So how do you use a decelerator to stop him in the car on something that's moving? So the way we figured it out is we attached the dead man, the end of the line, to the bottom of the car. So as it descended, your pick point never changed. It didn't matter if he jumped early, he jumped late, it was always going to work. But that's a lot of the things on that movie had to be, I mean, a lot of really smart people coming up with ideas and figuring stuff out. And
Well, I mean, because you've also got like a pretty great entrance sequence with Josh Holloway there and Leia Sadu when they're having a little fight, and then there's the Paula Patton Leia Sadu hand-to-hand combat sequence in the hotel as well. That's really well put together. But I actually wanted to talk about people other than Tom Cruise for a second, although I'm sure there are more Tom Cruise stories to come. But you mentioned the fall on the Burj. There's two other actors that were on that in that open set window, which is Paula Patton and Jeremy Renner hanging out that window catching Tom. What would they like to work with, and how did they take to doing these sort of quite death-defying stunts?
Jeremy's really low key. I mean, very easy to work with, low key. And I mean, we showed him the rig, and I said, there's no way you're going out that window, but you need to dive for it and let the cable do its job. And same with Paula. And Paula worked really hard on all the fights. She really trained and worked hard for the entire show to get to where she was. But I mean, it's with all the actors on any show I do. It takes, they're not real fight people usually, and they have to work their way into it and get them where they want. But it was 16-hour days, 7 days a week for half a year.
Was the Burj on Mission Impossible 4, was the Burj the biggest sequence to tackle, or the hardest moment in that film, or was there something that like people won't necessarily think was as hard, but actually was far harder to pull off?
No, I think that was the hardest one, and more so because we were being such perfectionists on. We really, it's like I said to Brad Bird, I said, we went to that building. And they told us, no, you can't get on the building. And I said, get me in a meeting with the engineers. And I went into the meeting with the engineers, and they go, how are you planning on attaching? And I go, we're gonna use, they had these quick release buttons that you could push into the side of the building. And I go, we're gonna use those. And he goes, well, those are only rated to 2,500 pounds. I go, I know, that's why we're going to capture it. I go, we're going to use, and I pulled out a bar, I drew it, and I go, we're going to use this bar, and we're going to pin it in 3 places. So we're going to triple that. And he just looked at me, and then he goes, okay, well, how are you going to do this? And I go, we're going to take out, we're going to put a piece of truss in there. I go, can we remove that little window? And he goes, yeah. And I go, so we'll put a piece of truss there and we'll do this. And he goes, okay. And he goes, well, how are you going to not scratch my building? And I pulled a piece of cable out and laid it on the table, and it was cable coated in rubber. I go, we're going to use rope and rubber. And no matter what he said, we had the answer. And he looked, and he was really smart guy, and he realized we're not there to damage his building because it hadn't been opened yet. You could never go do that, I don't think, right now. They told us we couldn't remove any windows, and we convinced them to take out 3, and we took out 17 in the end. They trusted us so much. When we had a guy that worked there, we called him, his nickname was Dr. No, because I would say, hey, can I? No. And, you know, I'm like, well, I didn't even ask a question. He goes, no, you cannot do it. And towards the end, I was like, can I drill? I need to drill a hole here. And they would go, and they had to get all the surveys and engineers, and they would drill it, and we would certify that it was good. And in the end, I'd say, hey, I need 2 holes drilled. He goes, where do you want them? You know what I mean? And he'd just come out, and they had this special equipment to X-ray the concrete, and because you had to make sure you weren't hitting any wires or pipes or. So that's why we weren't allowed to touch it. But yeah, 17 windows later, and we took so many windows out, the elevators didn't work because the wind was coming in on the 17th floor and skyrocketing down the elevator shaft and out the doors. So they were having all kinds of issues. So then we learned we had to plug certain windows. When you took out this window, you had to plug these windows to prevent the Venturi effect from coming. And there was a lot of problems, a lot of things to work out from the engineers, standpoint, ours. Yeah.
At the time, the sequence was considered like the high point for the Mission Impossible franchise for stunt sequences. I think it is often still in the conversation as the best, but I was curious if you kept up with the franchise going forward with like the later entries, Dead Reckoning or Fallout, if you'd been impressed with how they've continued to try to push the bar forward.
I mean, we went on to MI5, and the big thing in production was we need to beat the Burge. And I don't think they liked my answer. I said to the director on 4. I said, do you realize you're making history here? This will never be beaten, ever. This is the most iconic climbing sequence that will ever be done. Good luck beating it. And when we went on to 5, we have to beat the Burge. We have to beat the Burge. And I'm thinking, you're never going to beat that. You can do something equally good, but you're never going to just keep going bigger and bigger and bigger, because I don't see how you could. And I mean, we meant strapping them on the side of a A400 aircraft. But to me, that's not beating it, because I could take my mother and strap her on the side, and she's going to do this. You know what I mean? She could pass out. She's still going to do the stunt. So I didn't. There was the skill wasn't there that was done, and that they've continued doing now, moving forward. I think it's about doing something. It's a new publicity, something to attract the attention to the movie. Yeah. Tom loves to do it. Every movie, his movies have to have some big sequence, and that's the hardest thing. I mean, we came up with 10. My orders were come up with 10 ideas of things that have never been done before, and I did. And the director didn't like any of them. No, not good enough. And I disagree with a couple of them, but it was a never-ending search. So I leave the show. I don't mind doing that, because I leave the show with 10 things in my pocket.
Yeah,
and,
sure. Yeah.
To go on to the next movie, and I just throw them out. And some of them I've brought along, and I've tried for 10 years to get in a movie, and all of a sudden they get in. It's the movie has to be right. The sequence has to be right. And that's the biggest challenge and it's along the lines of, I've learned a lot about filmmaking from Tom. He likes heavy action. It has to make sense, much like John Woo's idea. And Tom likes to add comedy to his action, which I think is really, really smart. And it's really hard to come up with something exciting, fun that people can laugh about, and while at the same time be thrilled. So when I saw him do the motorcycle jump off the cliff, I know everybody sees, okay, he rode the bike and he jumped off the cliff and base jumped. What I saw in the footage I saw was when he opened the chute, you have no idea. I don't know if you've skydived or watched much of it. When that chute opens, you don't know if you're going to be going that way,
Yeah,
or that way, or to the left or right. Whichever way that chute opens is the direction you're going. And when I watched the drone footage and he's falling, and I saw the chute open and he ripped a 180. So he was heading for the cliff. So you better have your shit together to immediately turn a 180 to get away. But I don't know how many people saw that, but probably skydivers. But yeah, no, that was a fun. I thought that was cool. I wrote them and thought it was pretty cool.
nice.
It's interesting that the sort of the motto for 5 was "Beat the Burge." I like that concept, and it's a shame that it shot down some of your ideas. But could you share a couple of your pitches for beating the Burge?
I don't know.
Maybe ones you've used before. Maybe ones you've worked in. You ones you haven't said before.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna save them.
Oh.
I've been on movies, and because I've seen. Let's see. Of my 10 ideas that I pitched, I've seen 3 of them appear in films, and there was only 3 people in that room, so I know where they're coming from.
Right.
Hmm.
And that's why, yeah, I'm saving them for me. So
I fully understand that now you've said about the 3 people in the room. Enough said there. I get it. Well, let's move on to Rogue Nation, because it's a different job. You're coming in. I think you have the title of second unit director on that one. You got a bit of a different role on that film. Is that again through Tom? Because there's a bit of a power dynamic change, because you have Christopher McQuarrie coming in for the first time as a director in the Mission films. Somebody who's gone to do all of them since. What's that like as a director? How does he like to work for? And so, what was this? Obviously, beat the Burge was the motto, but what were you brought in to do for Rogue Nation?
Tom called, and they did not have a script. And he called me and he said, all the years that when I worked with him on Night and Day, and I worked with him on MI4, and I told him that, he knows that I used to race motorcycles professionally. And I used to tell him, yeah, I really want to do a motorcycle sequence. I've been dreaming of it I have an idea I've been dreaming of for 20 years, and someday I'm going to get it in a movie. So he called me and he said, you're going to get your dream. And I go, what's that? And he goes, I want you to direct second unit. I want you to design, storyboard, previs, a motorcycle chase. And so I wrote the chase, worked with a storyboard artist. We storyboarded the whole thing. Then we worked with an editor and a guy that did animatics out of storyboards. And it was a really great job, because I learned how to do that myself now from doing that. And this guy took it to the next level, though. I mean, he would make the wheels spin and tires smoke. And so we created a previs of the chase. And then they had a meeting with Paramount, and we showed them this 8-minute chase, and they greenlit MI5 based on that chase. And then Chris McQuarrie wrote the script around the chase.
So this is the chase where they're chasing Rebecca Ferguson on the motorcycles, and there's a car chase as well in that sequence.
Correct.
I think that's the whole thing. But Tom Cruise changes vehicles during the sequence.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, he starts out on a motorcycle and ends up in a car.
Yeah. That's it. That's the one. Yeah, because I was watching your reel, just going through it today, and specifically the motorcycle stuff is incredibly intense. Like, that is some of the fiercest motorcycle action I think I've ever seen.
Thank you. And that's old technology. I just did a movie very low budget, no prep, no nothing. But we took the next generation of cameras, and we took the latest and greatest cameras 2 years ago, which are now outdated, and we made a bunch of things, and we looked at it as an experiment for when I do my movie. This is a test. We're going to get paid to go test this.
Sure.
And the footage came out incredible. I mean, it's really, really good. And now we have even better stuff. So we're really excited moving forward to do another bike chase. But I wanted that chase to be as real as possible. The guy crashing the bike, the high side, was real. I mean, I couldn't. I used to be a motorcycle specialist, and if you told me I want you to come in high side, when I race, 9 out of 10 high sides I left in an ambulance, and they were fighting for it. The riders were fighting for it to do it, and I mean, he's doing 60 miles an hour, and it's real. But yeah, it was a fun movie. We trained at the racetrack, and Rebecca Ferguson, she was a lot of fun to work with as far as the bike stuff. She came up to me and goes, I want to look really good on the bike. And I said, just do what I tell you and you're going to be fine. And she just kept getting better and better. And I had her one time, she's leaned over, she's dragging her knee, the handlebar's a foot above the ground, and she's looking into the turn just like she's supposed to. And I said, I had a hot mic to her, and I go, okay, now turn and look at me. And she looks over, and I go, take your left hand, the one closest to the ground, off the handlebar, and give me the #1 sign. And she's shit-eating grin, and she does it. And it was awesome. But it gave her the confidence of, you can't fall off this rig. You're dragging your elbow almost on the ground. Her head's 18 inches above the ground. And it was to give her that confidence of, going into it. But right before we shot with her, that was all on the racetrack. When we went to the real cliffs, it was 3,000 feet down.
Yeah.
And we're doing 60, 65 miles an hour through the canyons. And as we were putting on, we put her on the bike, handed her her helmet, and I took mine, and she goes, as I was walking back to climb into the camera rig and tow vehicle, she goes, just how dangerous is this? And I stop and I turn around. I go, do you really want to know? And she goes, yeah. And I go, if something breaks, we're all dead. If we get a flat tire, we're all dead. And she goes, no chance of survival. I go, 0. And she goes, you're okay with that? And I put my helmet on and I go, yeah, are you? And she goes, let's do it. She was gung ho. And I mean, Tom brings that out of everybody, and I watched the behind the scenes for Top Gun, the new one. And, he brings that out of every actor that comes to work for him. He expects them to give it 120% and convinces them to do it.
And I was actually going to ask you, I'm not asking you to name names or anything, but you're talking about, Tom Cruise or Rebecca Ferguson, like they are gung-ho and have that kind of, the courage to do it. But when you're working with an actor who's much more nervous, going into a stunt, how do you kind of deal with that?
You know what? It's difficult on MI4. Oh God, what's his name? He passed away. He was the bad guy in MI4.
Michael Nyqvist. Yeah.
Yeah. He was afraid of heights.
I can relate.
And here he is working at 80 feet above the ground, and he was petrified. And he said, "I'm terrified." He goes, "I'm terrified." And I convinced him, look, we have you on a cable. It's, and he goes, he's walking along the car. And I mean, he looked just terrified. And I said, just don't look down, look up, just look up and because Tom's above you. So look up and, don't ever look down. And he worked his way through it, but that was really difficult for him. And I once had, on John Woo thing, I needed an actor to swim down 15 feet underwater, open the trunk of a car, and rescue the girl out of the trunk of the car and then swim back to the surface. And he didn't know how to swim. And it was a freer petrified of water. And we sent him to a one-on-one swim training with Navy SEALs, and they taught him how to swim for 3 days and hold his breath. And he ended up doing the sequence. Clive Owen did a great job. But you just have to not push them. If you push them, you're going to get in big trouble. And once they get mad, that's over.
We mentioned his name briefly coming up with moving on to Mission Impossible 5, which is Christopher McQuarrie. We'd spoken about Brad Bird and his directorial style and some of the challenges he's faced we've spoken about already. But Chris is coming on doing his first director. I think it's his first director's gig. Maybe it's his second one, something like that.
No, he done Way of the Gun and Jack Reacher.
Yeah, he already had one under his belt.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. But what was he like to work with as a director? And because it feels like he's more collaborative with Tom than some of the other directors he'd worked with at this point with the Mission films.
He's very deep in. I mean, he came in. I remember him coming on to MI4, and we had a problem with the script, and he came on to fix the script. Fix our issue with the director and figure a way to make it work and get out of this problem. And so he's very meticulous about what he wants, Chris, and very relentless in his search for that stunt, or that is going to fit the script that he's writing. And I mean, the scripts evolve. That's another problem, is you can have a plan of, we're going to do this, and then something happens along the way and the whole thing veers off course to another direction. And now the stunts aren't fitting the script anymore. And then Tom will walk in and go, we're not doing that. You know what I mean? And then him and Chris would go off into the trailer for 4 hours and come up, then they come out and say, this is what we're going to do. And we're like, and when are we doing that? And they go, how long do you need? It's like at least a day. And they go, okay, we're going to shoot this instead right now. And you guys, and I'd send the guys off to get them going on the next thing. So it's he's obviously got a big script writing background, and along with Tom, I think that it's always evolving, because they have the ability to recreate it on the fly. And he's a perfectionist, and he loves what he does, and I think it shows.
I just want to jump on something you said. Maybe I misheard it, but you mentioned like issues with the director on Mission Impossible 4. I had heard some problems that Brad Bird had in terms of taking to more physical directing as opposed to animation. But was there any challenges you faced, particularly with working with Brad, or there was like challenges on the set you saw?
No, I thought he did a great job. I thought he did a really good job. He came into it timid, but because he'd never directed a 1,500 person crew, you know what I mean? And
sure.
And I mean, I was giving him encouragement. I said, he goes, so I don't know what I'm doing. And I grabbed him. I went in his office. I said, dude, you do know what you're doing. That's why you're here. And I said, don't say that. You know what I mean? I go, you tell us what you want. And no matter how crazy it is, we can make it happen. And he was very, it was fun to watch him grow, because in the beginning he was like that on day one. And by the Burj Khalifa, I remember I was on the ground. It was insane. I couldn't look up anymore because my neck hurt. So I put a pad on the ground, and I had sandbags to rest my neck on. And I had Tom Cruise in this ear with a direct line to him. I had my riggers in this ear. I had a headset on with the helicopter pilots. I had 2 handheld radios. That's how many people I was talking to. And Brad, something didn't go right. And Brad came out, and he was mad because it didn't go right too. He came out, and I said, I just go, stop. I go, I got 5 people yelling at me right now. And I go, you're going to have to wait your turn. And he laughed. But it was really intense. But I said, I've already taken care of it, but I'll explain it in a minute. And, but he grew as the show went on. I remember there was one shot he was doing, and we just wanted to go home. It was our last shot before we went home for a break after working for 6 months. And we were only going to get a week off, and as it turns out, I got 2 days off. And he was trying to do that. He wanted to do this shot, and we're all looking at each other going, this is not going to work. This is terrible. This is not going to work. Well, after me and the DP, and at the end, after we did it, we looked at each other and go, that's pretty freaking awesome. It was really an ingenious shot that only an animator would have, dreamed up. And then we had to figure out how to make it happen. But no, it was fun to watch him grow, and he's a super nice guy. And I don't know. I don't know what he's up to these days. I'm sure he's back to doing his thing.
Yeah, I think he just signed up to do. Yeah, he's going back to Pixar to do Incredibles 3, I think. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Red alert, SpyHards, we are shaking things up over on the Patreon page.
That's right, we are launching an exclusive new show where we tackle the exploits of the small screen's greatest secret agents, like Jack Bauer, George Smiley, and beyond.
And don't forget, every month you also get 2 Agents in the Field episodes where we decode the adventures of your favorite spy actors in their biggest non-spy movies. But Cam, tell the people what we have coming up next.
Scott, if there's one thing spies are known for, it's traveling. And so you and I are going on a holiday, a Roman holiday, with the 1953 romantic comedy classic starring Gregory Peck and Audrey Hepburn. Hop on a Vespa and join us, everyone, because it's going to be a delight.
So strap on your Condor Man wings and soar into the future with us over at patreon.com/spyhards.
But before Big O zaps us with a red pulsating laser, let's get back to the Spy Jinx.
Well, I feel like we're mostly wrapping up on Mission 4 and 5, but I suppose more holistically looking back at your time on the Mission films, time working with Tom Cruise, what's sort of your fondest memory from those days on those 2 films? Is it from 4? Is it from 5? What do you go back to when you think about those films?
It's all of them. I mean, it's working with Tom. It's very rare that you have all my guys. It's the hardest work you will ever do in any movie. It's the hardest you'll ever work. But there's a difference between working for someone that doesn't appreciate it and somebody that does. And with Tom, he appreciates it. He lets you know. And if you need rehearsal time, you will have it. If you need money, he will get it. He'll make it happen. And it's a very rare, it's probably what I miss the most, is that anything that we can dream up, we can accomplish. And on other shows, they'll go, we don't have the money for that. We don't have the time for that. That's too dangerous. And it'll just get poo-pooed. So I guess that's the thrill of being able to do anything you want. And then there's the Tom factor, the fact that you gotta make it work for Tom. And when I did things for Tom, I didn't cut him any slack. I never landed him softer. I never, my take on it was, if you want to be the stunt man, then we're gonna make it look good. We're not gonna see you float in the last 6 inches. You're gonna hit hard. And yeah, I heard he was mad at me about one stunt because he hit so hard. The one on MI4 where he jumped out of the hospital window and rode down and dropped to the van.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was a hard hit. It was really hard. And because not only did he come off the roof of the van, he went to the ground, all in that one thing. And yeah, he was a little, I heard it was a thump, but it doesn't look good. If I float, you watch movies now and you can see the people float in, and I'm like, that's terrible. It's so if he wants to be the stunt man, then he's gonna take a lump. And he does. He gives it 100.
Well, this is it. I feel like everything I've learned about him and wanting to do stunts and wanting things to look real, he would probably ask you to go again if you didn't make it feel real.
Oh yeah.
I feel like he would probably make you do the stunt again anyway.
No doubt about it. No matter how dangerous it was, no matter what. He's, that's why I get mad when I hear people talk crap about him, because he really just wants to entertain he really does. He wants to entertain the audience. He doesn't need to do it. He doesn't need the money. He's doing it to entertain the audience and give us a good product to watch. Have you seen I just saw this a few weeks ago. I believe it's on Netflix. Tom Cruise, The Last Movie Star.
I haven't watched that yet. No.
That's a good watch. It's only about an hour, maybe an hour long. Maybe I think it's a little over an hour, and it's a really, we were flipping through the channels and I saw it, and I go, oh, this is gonna be a trash piece. And my wife goes, well, let's watch it. Let's just watch it. And I was blown away by it. It was actually a really good film, but it's on his career from day one to today.
Yeah.
And all the way through. And they're saying that he's, I always used to say he's the modern day James Cagney.
I say Buster Keaton.
Okay.
When I do the comparison. Yeah. Gave his body for it. Yeah.
I watched every movie that Cagney did, and to me, Tom's the modern day James Cagney, and to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
And to hear, I threw somebody off the set once. Somebody that was working with us, their brother came and he was on the set talking shit, and I said, get the hell out of here. I said, you don't know what you're talking about. He goes, he doesn't do his own stunts. He's a blah, blah, blah. And I said, you're full of shit, dude. And I said, you don't know what you're talking about. Get off the set.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, oh, I'm here as a guest. I go, not anymore. But
good man.
Yeah, no, it's he works really hard and takes night and day. I didn't want him to do a stunt. And he said, I'm doing it. And I said, I really don't want you to do this, and he goes, why? And I said, you might break a rib. And he goes, I'll be fine. So he does it. And weeks later, we're getting ready to do the big fight scene. And the stunt double comes up to me and whispers in my ear and says, hey, you didn't hear it from me, but remember when you told him he might break a rib? And I go, yeah. And he goes, yeah, he broke a few. And I go, perfect. And I go, so he's hurting right now. And I goes, yeah. So when you watch the fight in the train car, and he would get ratcheted and hit the wall and he'd scream, ah! And everybody's like, oh man, he's really acting. I go, he ain't acting. That's the real deal. But then on MI4, I said, I don't think you should do that. And he goes, why? And I go, you might break a rib. And he didn't know that I knew. And he goes, we're going to let Casey do that one.
I'm gonna cut that story together with a clip from Night and Day, and just so you can see the impact on that scene. I'll find it, because that's priceless.
I don't remember where he got hurt. I forget what he got hurt on, but yeah, he was hurting and just sucked it up. But I mean, it's not easy. I've worked with broken ribs, and it's really painful.
Yeah. Well, I think also of the scene in Mission Impossible Fallout where he broke his leg doing the jump, and then immediately got up and kept on running. Yeah, the ankle. Yeah, and
there's no quitting, man. There is no quit. There is no. Yeah.
I suppose then, coming away from Mission Impossible, although I'm sure we could talk for many more hours on missions alone, you've done a ton of other spy movies, and that's what we talk about here on the show. And I know Cam's got a couple of questions for a couple of films. I was going to ask you about Night and Day, but I think we actually covered quite a lot of Night and Day, which I think is a bit of an underrated Tom Cruise film for people who haven't checked it out.
I think so. The only person I ever heard that didn't like it was my mother, and I said, why didn't you like it? And she goes, I don't know, but I go, everybody else I know loved it. But in the Tom Cruise Last Movie Star, they call it a failure, and I'm like, they call Waterworld a failure, and it wasn't. It was a tremendous movie.
Yeah.
We just watched that on the show for a separate episode, and actually, the stunt work on that is tremendous stuff. A lot of practical work going on there. People don't think about it, but a lot of effort went into Waterworld, and you were a part of that team.
Yeah, I came in. I was supposed to go on Broken Arrow, and I was leaving on Broken Arrow in 3 weeks, and they called me and they said, our riggers just quit and we need somebody to take over. And I said, I'm not available. And they go, well, what are you doing? And I said, I'm leaving on Broken Arrow in 3 weeks. They go, can you come help us until that time? That gives us 3 weeks to find somebody else. So I said, okay. I go, sure. And I go, when do I leave? And they go, 6 hours. Your flight leaves in 6 hours. And I'm like, oh, no, no. So 3 days later, I'm sitting in Hawaii, and then I got so involved in the 3 weeks that I couldn't leave. I mean, we designed all the rigs and practiced with Costner, and yeah, so we had to stay. I ended up staying for half a year.
Well, I think the one of the films I wanted to bring up is more of a comedy, spy comedy, but This Means War. Tom Hardy and Chris Pine, which had a few action sequences in it, my memory serves. But it's an interesting one doing action sequences with comedy, because you mentioned Tom likes to inject a bit of comedy into the films he does as well. How do you find sort of choreographing action sequences that keep a bit more of a comedic tone to them? And is that tougher than doing sort of straight action films?
It's a lot harder. I have to, in This Means War, I actually did not work on it because
I've misread.
That's a whole story in itself. But I designed the end sequence.
Okay.
And I was supposed to shoot it, second unit, and do it. And long story short, they didn't have the green lit. So I went down and I got brought in by the director, and he said, he showed me his movie, and he goes, I hate this ending. And he goes, and then he played movies that I'd done. He goes, I want this. So I said, well, why don't we do this and this and this and this? And he said, don't go anywhere. And he brought everybody in and he said, tell them what we're going to do. And I told him, he goes, hire him right now. So I did get hired, but they didn't have the money. So they kept canceling me. We prepped everything and they kept canceling me. So I booked a $10,000 non-refundable. My wife said, you're a chicken shit if you don't hit enter on a non-refundable vacation. So I hit enter. And as I was printing out my vacation, I said, the phone's going to ring any second. And she goes, who cares? And all of a sudden it goes, bring. And I looked and it says, it's the studio. I go, see that? And they really were greenlit and somebody else did it. But yeah, I was only doing the additional photography, but at least I designed it. And,
so your idea is in the film, at
least.
Your concept is there.
So,
okay.
But to answer your question about comedy is, I've done Mr. Deeds and a lot of the Adam Sandler shows and Rob Schneider, and it's really, really hard to do comedy and make the stunts look good. And when you watch The Killer, we brought a little of that. There was a part in there which I wasn't happy with, where the actress does this stunt to get away, escape from a police station, and then they wanted the co-star to get away. Later in the movie, he finds himself, she gets away from him, and he gets later in the movie, he's in the same situation. Now he's being arrested, and he uses the same escape. And I'm like, well, that's stupid. So, we turned it into, I said, how about if you lose your grip halfway down and fall? And he goes, but I wouldn't fall. And I go, yeah, but if we have you fall and we can get this big, you're not supposed to be a rock star like her. You're supposed to be just a regular cop. And, you dive, you slide, you lose your grip, you fall, crash through the table. I go, we'll make the audience laugh. And when we were at the screening, I was very happy that everybody did laugh. You know what I mean? And that was the whole idea, was by adding a little humor to it, it made it fun. Before it was cool, now it was fun. And and back to MI5 is Benji in the car sequence where they go down the stairs. They were going to rehearse it, and I said, don't. I said, shoot the rehearsal. And they go, why? And I go, you're never going to get the same reaction from that man as you are on that first take. And that's not rehearsed. That's really him going. That's what he felt going down the stairs.
I'm going to cut that in too. I think that's a perfect little bit there of Benji looking very scared, I imagine.
Well, no, he was having fun with it. It was, I mean,
Oh, good.
it was a rehearsal, but
Yeah.
you could see, and I really believe that is on certain stunts, you have to shoot the rehearsal because you will never, once they experience it,
Hmm.
now it's a known thing and you're never going to get that reaction that you get the first time.
Right. And we're talking about spy movies, and one movie we covered on the show I'd love to know about your participation in was Leon the Professional.
I was a stunt guy in that. Which scene did I do? Where they blow up the storefront?
Okay. Yeah.
And me and
Oh.
a friend of mine were the two policemen at the cop car, and we duck as it blows. And if we didn't duck, you'd be looking at a skeleton right now. That's how much that it was so huge. Oh my God. Yeah, that was a big explosion. But that was the only scene I worked in on that movie. I'm sorry to say.
No. I mean, I was interested in some of those early credits where you were doing stunts, often uncredited. And a movie that I have all the love in the world for was Batman Returns. And I was curious what you did on that one.
We did. I did all the rigging on that, the wire rigging, and I was one of the motorcycle guys in the um, sequence. I was on the dance floor. I got blown when they blew up the dance floor, so I was one of those people in there. But mainly, yeah, I was in charge of the rigging on that one.
Were you like wearing the giant like skull head on the motorcycle? Is that one of the characters?
Um, did we wear skull? I guess we did.
Oh.
Yeah, we jumped out of a box. We had like 6 motorcycles in a box, and there was literally, if you were next to me and you went before I did, we were both going to crash. We were both going to crash and take out everybody else. So it was a very technical, everybody had to leave at a very precise moment. And yeah, it was a lot of complicated stuff on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great sequence. I've watched that movie many a times. And the other one I was curious about was Ghostbusters.
I was working as an extra. So Ghostbusters 1, I was working with some kids a couple of years ago, and they go, "Hey, what's it like to work with so-and-so?" I go, "Who the hell's that?" And they go, "So in Ghostbusters." I go, "I never heard of that guy. He wasn't in Ghostbusters." And they go, "He was in Ghostbusters." And I go, "Which Ghostbusters are you talking about?" He goes, "Ghostbusters." And I go, and he goes, 2 years ago. And I go, "No, dude." I said, "I worked on the original." My nickname with them is "Hey, old man." That was it from then on. But I actually was working as an extra, and I remember because CG was so early back then, and we were running through the city of New York with hundreds and hundreds of extras, and I'm looking up. I was working special ability extra, and which you could do back then, and I'm running, looking at this big giant doughboy in the sky, and I trip and I fall, and I broke my nose on it because somebody kicked me in the nose by accident, and
Jeez.
that was a fun day. But yeah, no, I remember Roger Rabbit. Doing Roger Rabbit was early CG stuff.
And what did you do in Roger Rabbit?
I was one of only 3 live people. I was one of the motorcycle cops.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
There was like 3 of us in the movie, and everybody else was a cartoon.
I feel remiss if I didn't also mention. We're just sort of going through your IMDb now, picking out things that we like. But because of the spy connections, you did work quite a few episodes of Alias, the J.J. Abrams television show, as stunt coordinator and second unit on that as well. And that's kind of in the Mission Impossible sandbox too, because of the third one. That's JJ and his team. They all came over for that. What were sort of your experiences like on Alias?
Alias was, I mean, I had fun with it because I was coming off of movies, and a friend of mine was the coordinator, and he would come in, and then he would get a movie, and he would call me and say, "Hey, you want to take over?" And I go, "Yeah." I'm available. So I'd run in, and then when he came back, I'd exit, and I'd leave and he'd take back over. So we just threw it back and forth for a few years. And the fight guys hated me on the first day. I came in, and they had this whole, they go, okay, we're going to show you the fight routine. And it's punch, 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 kick, throw, judo throw, punch, kick, throw, punch, punch. And I was like, okay, I've seen it. No, we're only halfway through. I'm like, oh no, you're done. And I go, we're going to start over. And I go, okay, so start from the beginning. And it's punch, punch, kick. And the guy goes back into the fireplace. And I go, okay, now I'm going to stop. I go, now I'm going to step in, punch, punch. And they kick me. And I go back into the fireplace. And there's this big, giant candelabra. And I reach up and I grab it and I go, boom. I go, you're out. You're done. And the guy goes, no. He goes, what about the big fight? I go, there is no big fight. That's it. That's the whole shot. And he was furious. And the director came to watch. And he goes, okay, let me see the fight. And they're watching and they're doing the whole thing. And I go, okay, now show him mine. He goes, no. And I go, okay, I'll show him. And I grab the candelabra and I smash the guy and I go, fight's over. And he goes, I love it. That's what we're shooting. But it was, and I would trade. So I would go in and I would trade, they would say 10 people, Jennifer takes out 10 guards. I go, how about Jennifer takes out 3 guards? And we take the other 7 people and all the money we were going to give them, and we do a big fire, hire one guy and do a big fire burn, or do a high fall, so I was trying to less stunts, bigger stunts, and they really loved it. And I was still on budget. So it was a fun show. The producer, I loved the producer, and I would sit in the meetings and it was the only show I could ever do where I could do my stunt budget on a napkin, on a little piece of paper. And at the end of the meeting, I could slide it over and I'd say, am I on? And they'd look and they go, perfect, thank you. And I was done with the budget in the production meeting. And instead of spending 40 hours doing one. But it was fun. Worked with a lot of good directors. And Jennifer was fantastic. I remember I came in once and I didn't want Jennifer to do her fight. And they said, why? And I go, the double goes, why? And I go, because she's not performing like she used to, and whether she's injured or doesn't have the time, I go, but the fights are starting to look not good. And I didn't know it, but she worked with Jennifer that night after wrap. They stayed all night and rehearsed that fight. And when we came in the next day, she walked in and Jennifer, they go, okay, we're going to rehearse. And Jennifer killed it. And she looked over at me and goes, Jennifer's back. And she was. So it was fun. She was, of all the Cameron Diaz, one of the best, kindest people you could work with. Jennifer Gardner was the same way. But so they were fun. It was fun to work on that. And the crew was wanted to do Mission Impossible style stuff. So it was easy to convince them to turn up the ante. And it was a lot of fun. I did Lost with JJ, the pilot.
The pilot as well. That's the big one. That was.
Yeah. And they offered me, they said, do you want to move to Hawaii for 5 to 7 years? I go, no, I said, I've already got island fever and we only been here a month. And I said, I'm out. And that was probably a big mistake. I mean, if you just want to work, but I don't. I want to work and create. And
well, it's like you kind of like you achieved that challenge in a sense. Like that pilot episode of Lost stands as one of the best pilot episodes I think of any television show of history. And I think a lot of that is to do with the action that takes place in that. And sort of the practicalities of what was happening in that episode. You came and you conquered that, and you wanted to conquer other things. So it's a perfect choice to go and do more films, I think.
Yeah, no, I just did 2 years ago. I did a pilot for JJ, another pilot, and yeah, I like working. He's a great guy to work for. Very, very good guy. We did a show called Duster, which I don't know if it's still out or not. Yeah, I did the pilot, and then I was supposed to do the show, and the studio changed studios, and they got real cheap and wanted me to take a 50% pay cut, and I went on my merry way.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple of questions to sort of wrap us up now as we're coming towards the end. One thing I'd be interested to know, because I'm sure you get this a lot when you're being interviewed, and it's a pretty a dumb question, so I'll change it slightly. But holistically looking back at all the stunts you've worked on, all the big set pieces you've done, what was the biggest challenge you had to overcome to put together, and what was the most fun sequence that you put together?
I mean, there's a few. Face Off was the shootout in Face Off was
Great
a
sequence.
tremendous amount of work, and that was a oneer.
Mhm.
That whole thing with like 13 cameras. Wind talkers. I remember the night before we did the opening battle sequence, I was having trouble going to sleep, and my wife's like, "What's, you know?" And I go, "I don't know if I'm ready to. This is so big. I'm nervous." We had 3,000 extras and airplanes and helicopters and 50 tanks, and racing through these stunt people and extras, and it went perfect. But that was really a memorable. The bike chase on MI5 was, it took us, we spent $1 million in prep, and the studio was furious. I stumbled upon them arguing about me, and they said, I go, "What are you arguing about?" And they go, "You spent $1 million." And I go, "You'll thank me at the end." And they go, "Yeah, well, that remains to be seen." And in the end, I said to him, I said, "Are you still mad about the $1 million?" And he goes, "Hell no, you saved us 3.5." And because we prepped it properly. But everybody, the motorcycle rig, we built in 1 month what Chapman Cranes couldn't build, and that was their specialty. And we built it in a month, and it didn't work. And I remember being in London, and time was running out, and everybody was backing away from us, and it was me and the special effects coordinator and his Einstein. I called him Einstein. And Einstein and me and him just kept at it. And I said, "You know what the beauty of this is when it succeeds, there's only 3 of us that are going to get all the credit, instead of that whole crowd of hangers-oners we had. They're all run." And it worked. 3 days later, it was history.
Mm-hmm.
And the Burge, was because so much hard work went into it from a crew. And my crew on that one, I picked the 5 best guys I thought there were in the business and put them together, and they weren't friends, and they fought like cats and dogs, and it took me months for them to gel. And now they're all really good friends, work together still to this day. And I still think they're the best there is. And so it was fun to do those, but I can't really pick one, I don't think.
No, that's fine. I suppose on the flip side of that, because a lot of the films you mentioned there, well, all of them are well-known, well-respected films. What's a sequence that you worked on that maybe sort of went under the radar that people should go and check out? I mean, we spoke about Night and Day. Not enough people saw that in my book. A lot of good stuff in that film. But is there a particular sequence or a film that you worked on you think people should go and find as like, this is some great work here that people should go check out?
Waterworld.
Yeah,
perfect.
And the reason I say that is we were in Hawaii, and we were doing groundbreak. That's not CG. That's Kevin Costner really doing it. And the reason EP Entertainment, criminals, that they are, they said, "We want to come interview come do the set." And they said, "Don't bother coming because it's a closed set. Nobody's allowed here." So they, in their arrogance, loaded up on a plane and flew to Hawaii and showed up at the gate. And they were told to go away. and denied entry. So they left and went back to the airport, rented a used 500 helicopter, took the doors off and hung a cameraman on the side. And they came and low passed over us and were flying over the set, ruining all the filming because, you know, you got a helicopter flying around and they're filming. And then that night, by the time we wrapped and went back to the hotel, said Waterworld's a disaster. What a piece of shit. Don't go see it. And I mean, after I got home, I'm in the bathroom, you know, I'm washing my hands and I hear her go, hey, did you see Waterworld? I ain't gonna see that piece of shit. The news said it's a piece of shit, so I'm not going. So how many people didn't go see that movie because of Entertainment Tonight? You know, it's a shame because the stuff on it was so much work went into it, and Costner basically he did everything. You know, he did all of his own stuff. He wasn't as brave as Tom, you know, I don't say that in a bad way. I mean, you know, Tom's confident, and Kevin would look at me and I go, you're good to go. And he'd do it, you know, but it was, yeah, no, that was, to me, that was a really good movie that got trashed.
Yeah. I mean, the swashbuckling action in that movie is phenomenal.
Well, I'll give you one when he's on the trimaran and he runs at the back and he grabs the rope. And he goes flying all the way to
shoots up
all the way to the front of the ship, lets go and grabs a harpoon gun and fires it. That's all in one, and he is not on a cable.
Wow.
He flipped his hand into the rope, so slid his hand through the loop and grabbed the rope. And I said, just don't open that hand till you land, you know, and because it would have just, yeah, we did a bunch of stuff with him that the director would he would do all the stunts and rehearse and then show Kevin and demonstrate it to make him do it. I did it, you have to do it. But
I guess though that movie has had a legacy in terms of its stunts because of the Universal Studios attraction.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of work, and I mean, I was on there half a year, and the people that were on it the whole time were on for over a year.
Well, there's that whole like flotilla sequence, not flotilla, but there's like that little island, the man-made island at the start, like where he's trying to escape and the pirates are attacking, and like you just think like, you know, Pirates of the Caribbean wishes it was something like this. Like this is some really groundbreaking stuff, and I remember seeing that film as a kid and thinking it was like the bee's knees, and never understanding why people didn't really get along with it. And obviously later on, I'd learned all the sort of press nonsense that got involved. But Cam and I rewatched it recently, and we were bowled over by it. So I think people should be going to check that out for sure.
I think one mistake they made in it was, and I was saying it while we were filming, and I kept saying the music for when they're attacking needs to be, they played opera music.
Right.
Now they played opera music. I wanted them to, and I didn't know that's what they were going to play. I was like, can you imagine this with Alice in Chains? You know,
yeah,
playing the rooster or I'm the man in the box. That's the music for this. And we're all like, yeah. And then we're watching this got opera music. We're like, no.
They made a choice.
Perfect, and I think that was a great pick. So people should go and check out Waterworld. Absolutely. Going forward, last two questions now. You've mentioned you've got a script in mind for doing the perfect, you know, motorcycle film. We've got that, but what is it you're currently working? What can people sort of expect from you in the next couple of years?
Right now, nothing. Right now, there's literally,
Okay.
I don't know anybody that's working. And the word is that they're just starting to hire now that I don't know if you guys are aware, we just had another strike here with the Teamsters. So that's over now. So, I mean, you know, between COVID in 2020 and then COVID in 2021 and
two strikes last year,
the strikes and now strikes this year, it's been really rough on a lot of people I know. I mean, I've been, knock on wood, very fortunate. I've kept really busy throughout, but right now I don't have anything lined up. And the word I hear is that they're hiring line producers, are just starting to hire them, and that they're going to start making phone calls around November.
Okay.
For next year. But nobody, that's what I hear, nobody is working this year. That's what I hear. I know Canada's dead. I know America's Dead. I think it's pretty busy in London right now, I think, but I don't really know.
Everyone's asleep technically right now, but I've heard it's busy during the day. But no, there's a lot of filming going on around London at the moment. You're not wrong. It is quite busy. Europe is actually quite busy for filming at the moment. Yeah.
Because it's and they say it's too expensive here in America. And I can see that. I mean, the movie I did when we did The Killer, if we had done that in America, the stunt budget would have been like 2.8 million, and by doing it in France, it was 1.7. So I mean, there's $1 million right there just in the stunt budget, and if you take that through every department. But you know what? I don't know if they're really doing their math, because the quality of the film, took a hit, and not saying anything bad. It's just the experience. It's hard. When we went to Vancouver 25 years ago, the experience wasn't there, and now it is. They don't need us anymore. And the same thing's going to happened in London, and the same thing's going to happen in France. And no matter what country, they'll keep hunting until they run out of countries. And as the local crews get better, they raise the rate, and so eventually it'll all equal out. But no, I don't know. I'm hoping to get something. I'm hoping to get something I can just take the crew I had on the last show was really, really good, and I'd love to just put them back together and go we had a lot of laughs and a lot of fun and did some good stuff. So it'd be fun to go do it again.
Great. Metal. I love it. And the last question I've got, and this has been asked at everyone that's ever been on the show, so no pressure, but everyone's listening. It's the hot seat now. Gregg Smrz, what is your favorite spy movie of all time?
Oh, God.
We don't like to prep people for this question. We like to catch people off guard, unawares, because it makes you think about it. Because we talk about spy movies every week, so we're well versed in the genre, and you've done a lot of them. So you must have a favorite.
I have to be careful, because a lot of them, what's funny is Mission Impossible was always real, and James Bond went to the hokey side, and then Gary Powell said, "I'm jealous because you're doing realism," and we switched places. Now James Bond is serious, and MIs are kind of hokey, going
a little out there.
A little out there. Yeah. So they've switched roles, but so I can't really, to be honest with you, I can't pick those two. So trying to think of spy movies.
You can go classics, like all the way back to Hitchcock's and stuff like that. There's a ton of spy movies over the years. There's plenty for everyone.
You're going to catch me. I don't watch movies. I don't.
I actually hate films.
I don't have time. I really don't have to. I'm so busy. Okay, spy movie. Damn.
Okay. All right. Because this is all on a recording, I'll press you for an answer, but I will help you out by saying, of the spy movies you've worked on, so we're looking from This Means War, Leon, Night and Day, Mission Impossible 2, 4, and 5. I think it was a couple more we've mentioned, or you can even chuck in Alias if you'd like. What was your favorite of those?
I mean, I really liked Mission 2. And they trashed it. Everybody trashed it, and I just don't get it. And
I don't either. I'm a big defender.
If you do it in today, when you watch that last Movie Star, they think MI2 is one of his best films, and you'll see they'll get into that. But it's funny is people either got it or they didn't. But I guess I liked 2, but
I think pick 2. I think that's the perfect choice.
Yeah, I'd say either 2 or because I mean, yeah, I'd have to say 2.
Yeah, and it has like a lot of the hallmarks of John Woo, which makes it extra interesting as well.
We had no script. He winged it. The whole show, the whole movie was thrown together as we ran, invented while we shot.
I mean, we've had one of the writers on for Mission Impossible 2. It went through quite a few quite an evolution for sure. They aped a lot of it off of a Hitchcock film, funnily enough.
Well, John's a big Hitchcock fan.
And so were the writers, so that's probably why they were involved. Perfect. There you go. But Mission Impossible 2 is your pick, Greg. I'm genuinely impressed by that. I absolutely love that that's the one we're going for. I think a lot of people listening will love that too. And I think all that really leaves me to say is Greg, genuinely, thank you for spending the time with us today to break down Mission and much more. You've given us a ton of stories. I'm sure everyone listening has had a fabulous time, but thank you very much for your time, sir.
All right. Thank you. Take care, guys.
Same to you. Thank you very much.
There you go, folks. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you to our guest, Mr. Gregg Smrz, for breaking down Ghost Protocol and all the wonderful other spy treats he's worked on throughout his career so far. Cameron, what did you think of that?
Well, before I answer that, I should probably just clarify for the audience that Greg emailed us once the interview was over to confirm to us that his favorite spy movie of all time is actually True Lies. And not only is it his favorite spy movie, it's also his favorite movie. So there you go. You can all sleep well tonight.
Mm-hmm.
But to answer your question, Scott, this was one of my favorite types of interviews where we're talking to someone who doesn't just have a great technical knowledge, but is also a sensational storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
And so to hear all of these anecdotes about not just the great stunts in Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, but the other missions films, Night and Day, even some Batman Returns stuff in there. It was wonderful. And I think like if I'm to pick like one nugget that really jumped out to me, it was the action sequence at the closing of Ghost Protocol and how that was supposed to be Tom Cruise's semi-exit from the series. And that he was supposed to have his leg broken. Ethan Hunt's leg was supposed to be broken. And it was all in the script. They had it all set up to do, and Tom Cruise was like, I am not ready to go out.
Yeah, what a way to do that, and just decide on set as well. That's very Hollywood of him.
That's what you can do when you're a producer.
It certainly is, and I think probably a wise choice given the course of the films afterwards.
Yeah, I can imagine that at the time it would have made sense, because 3 didn't perform as well as it should, and so you're going,
and
well...
2 was like kind of lambasted by a lot of people as well.
Yeah, and then 4 is going to come out, but you don't know how it'll do, and you know what? Like Tom Cruise, maybe even at that point when he's signing on to do it...
15 years since the first one.
Exactly, so maybe even in his mind at that point, he's like, you know what, I am getting older... Jeremy Renner seems very enthusiastic. I'm okay with passing it off. But then going and shooting the movie, having the absolute time of your life, because you know that apparently Tom Cruise is completely fearless, according to Greg there. And so he's shooting things like the, the Burj Khalifa and going, you know what? I want to do more of this.
Yeah, well, he's clearly become a bit of an adrenaline junkie, especially in his older career as a Hollywood legend now. I mean, just look at what he's gone on to do with the Mission films and Top Gun Maverick and stuff like that. Like, I think this is probably one of his first big tastes, Night and Day as well before this, of like that real, like being the stuntman, being the Charlie Chaplin, you know.
And he was probably thinking like, I didn't get this kind of excitement in Lions for Lambs.
He did not. I was going to think of a film that was also pretty boring of his that he did. Magnolia.
I mean, Magnolia is, I wouldn't call it boring, but it's definitely not, swing for the fences stunts.
It's not turbocharged. Let's put it that way.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're gonna, I'm glad he took that back. I'm glad he knew and actually sort of probably went for his senses and went with his gut instinct on that one, because I think it was definitely the right choice. And in terms of like highlights for me, I mean, there's tons, but you guys just sat through an hour and 45 of pure magic, so I'm sure you've all got your favorites too. But just hearing about putting the Burj Khalifa sequence together, I mean, as I say, Greg hasn't done many interviews in the past, and this is invaluable stuff. I bet there's information in there for like stunt people to pick through, budding stunt people as well, stuff like that. It's a film school in a conversation, but just like knowing how much craft and care went into putting that sequence together, because a lot of people can go to the cinema or watch it at home and be like, oh, that looked pretty cool, but you don't stop to think about the actual artistry that went into putting that sequence together and how like practical a lot of it was. I mean, it was all mostly practical, but like actually they were hanging from the building for a while, and it wasn't all done on a set, etc., etc. And I just think, just talking to Greg, I just sort of got a sense of just how proud he was of the sequence that he and Tom and Brad and the rest of the team put together.
And I really appreciated that little kind of insight he gave where he said, when they finished that one, some people were like, well, but you're glad to have that stunt over with, and now we can move on to the other stuff. And he's like, well, those ones are just as dangerous.
Yeah.
You can fall off the Burj Khalifa or you could fall off 2 stories. Either way, you never know, right? Like, it's all about, obviously, safety and preparation and all that, but just because it's on this massive skyscraper doesn't necessarily make it that much more dangerous than other stunts.
No, and I think it goes to show, I mean, there's probably some more stories as to why Greg didn't continue with the Mission series going forward, but the mantra going into Mission Impossible Rogue Nation was, how do we beat the Burj?
Mm-hmm.
Like, has that become the benchmark behind the scenes in the Mission films? Have they topped them? That's a question for us to maybe tackle down the road, but I'm interested to hear what you all think at home. It was the Burj the practical stunt highlight of the Mission film so far? It's interesting.
It is, and some might be more complicated technically
Yeah.
later down the road, but in pure sensational visuals on screen, it's a tough call. I'm not sure they have.
No, I mean, people will point out the jump in Dead Reckoning. They'll point out the what was the big one in Fallout? The Halo jump.
There's the Halo jump. It was a big deal, but also the helicopter stuff as well.
Sure. Yeah. Which, again, probably much harder to shoot than perhaps the Burj was. But, like, in terms of putting one's life on the line, I still feel like Burj might just be the one that was, like, the closest to Tom just not making it back.
It does feel like that, and I think people get a feeling in the pit of their stomach when they watch the Burj Khalifa sequence that they don't necessarily get watching the helicopter sequence in Fallout.
I get the same feeling in my stomach when I watch Condor Man.
We all do. That's a collective thing.
It's a wild ride the entire way through.
You watch that animated Condor Man like jump off the Eiffel Tower at the start, and you're just like, it doesn't get better than this.
Wow! What a film! But what a conversation as well. I mean, I'm so glad we could put Gregg's thoughts and feelings out on the air. As I say, it doesn't do many of these, so we're very pleased to have had him on the show, very pleased to have had the stories, and very pleased to have had you all to come and join us for this wonderful, wonderful interview. I'm glad you all enjoyed it. Well, I certainly hope you did anyway. I'm assuming you all enjoyed it at this point, really.
I can't imagine they didn't.
I can't imagine either. But the journey, the celebration doesn't stop there, Cam. What do we have coming up later this week?
Yes, we are going to be talking to Ilya Volok, who played the Fog, the arms dealer informant that Ethan Hunt meets with about the midpoint of Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol.
Yeah, a really fascinating interview again, that one there. Again, someone who hasn't really spoken much about working on Mission, but has worked on a ton of other spy movies as well that we get into. Just another celebration of one of our preferred Mission Impossible films in Ghost Protocol. So your mission, folks, should you choose to accept it, is to join us later this week as we sit down with Mr. Ilya Volok. And if you like what you heard on this episode, please consider joining us over on the Patreon, patreon.com/spyhards. That's the cheap plug of the episode, but we genuinely appreciate if you came across and showed your support for the show. And failing that, I mean, obviously times are hard. I understand it completely. If you just want to join us over on social media at SpyHards, that's SpyHards, and just come chat with us on there and just show your love. Just fly the SpyHards flag somehow.
Exactly, yes.
But until next time, folks, you'll find Cam and I furiously scrolling through night and day to find that magical moment where Tom Cruise bumped his ribs.